كبرات تخططت مدب ستيتنا لو مدبنا بزعباتها إريتريا Escaping Eritrea تبل بفرونت لاين دالوت عادة دالوت producer and director Evan Williams سينا interview هنقبر Mr. Williams, this is Setit Media, and thank you for the opportunity. And I was just saying, we're doing this interview with the director and producer of the Frontline Investigative program, Escaping Eritrea, that was recently aired on PBS and other outlets. And thank you for this opportunity, and we welcome you to Setit Media.
Thank you very much for your interest. It's a very important story, and we've done our best to try and be fair and accurate to all sides, but also to try and tell the story of the Eritrean people.
Thank you. You gave us a rare opportunity to see inside Eritrea in the prison area, and which is very hard to do at this time and over the decades. And my first question is, given the rare production from Eritrea, coming from inside Eritrea, how challenging was the making of Escaping Eritrea?
Well, it was extremely challenging. I mean, I'd like to start from the outset by saying that really my job was to try and facilitate and to enable Eritrean people who were trying to tell this story themselves. So we didn't want to be a foreign broadcaster coming in and giving it our version. We worked very closely with Eritreans who were trying to get their version of what's going on inside the country out to the outside world. They just didn't have the technology or the capacity to get it onto an independent broadcasting service and into public service broadcasting in America and in Britain, Australia and France and Germany, across Europe. So our job was to try and help them tell their story, really. And we started by meeting Michael, as you see in the film, who had very bravely secretly filmed inside Adabieto. And then we decided that we needed more information. We needed more detail and more visual proof of what was going on inside the country. So that then took a lot of time to find the right people who were willing to do it, who were trying to do it and had the capacity to do it. And also then we're able to then safely bring the material to us. So there was a lot of things at play. And the most important barrier was really the control, the secrecy, and the fear that I experienced through these people that they were experiencing from the Eritrean authorities. Anybody that was trying to get this information out, in my experience, was absolutely terrified of being arrested or having their families arrested. And so therefore, we had to be very careful about who we worked with and how they did it. It was all about really people trying to get around the controls inside the country. That's my independent analysis of what it's like.
Okay, and at the same time, in addition to what you're addressing as challenge, one of the challenges also, you were not able to go inside Eritrea and do your part of the process of this investigation reporting or investigative reporting. Could you clarify on that or elaborate on that?
Sure. I mean, I would have been very, very happy. In fact, we applied to the Eritrean authorities to go into the country, and they just didn't get back to us. We were therefore rejected. There's also the reality that that I became aware of, that if we were doing an investigation such as this, which was to obtain visual proof of the incarceration of large numbers of people, that was then not enabling the authorities to deny that this incarceration occurs. And that's the proof we obtained in the documentary. Then by going inside the country, we were potentially putting any people that we contacted at risk, in my view, because foreign journalists in Eritrea, as I understand it, are very closely watched. The government will pretend that that doesn't occur, but we know that's true. And we also know people inside the country. If a foreign TV crew turns up and starts asking questions about anything other than how great the government is, we know that that's a risk for them. And that was not the film's purpose. The film's purpose was to be an investigation to obtain visual proof of the incarceration of those people who had either tried to flee the country or to escape lifelong national service in some cases. So we focused on that.
Perfect. So, as you said, it was the intention of this investigative reporting was to get or obtain a visual proof, right? And based on that, there are those who ask why it took so long to make this public, and there are those who ask the timing. Are those two things parallel? And what would you say about Escaping Eritrea? Why does it took long since 2016? And is there a timing issue?
Both very good questions. I'll answer the first one first. I mean, it took so long because we obtained the first tranche of material from inside Adabieto prison in 2016, as you say, and that was independently filmed by a contact that we made. So we obtained that material and we filmed. Then we started filming testimony to try and support or to knock down what we were being told. I mean, we approach these things very independently. There is no political agenda that we come at this at our job with at all, and particularly in Eritrea. I mean, I've got great respect and regard for the Eritrean people and the struggle for independence over more than 30 years. I find Eritreans an incredibly industrious and intelligent and wonderful people. It's not about that. We're not trying to knock down Eritrean independence. We're just trying to tell people what's going on inside the country and why so many people are leaving Eritrea. That was the beginning of the whole documentary. We, from a European perspective, were wondering, why is it so many Eritreans are leaving Eritrea and trying to get into Europe? Now, anyway, the Eritrean government will be saying, well, these are all Ethiopian Tigrayans and it's all a corrupt system and it's all a pull factor by some sort of, conspiracy theory by the West. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nobody in the West wants more refugees. And we all know it's become a major political issue. So that's just complete rubbish. The issue is people are leaving Eritrea for another reason. And that's what we went on to investigate. And they're leaving it because they don't want lifelong national service and they want to escape detention. So when we started getting involved in this in 2016, we got that first tranche of material. But then we had to be very, very careful about how we then obtained more evidence, more visual evidence of the detention system. And that took time. It took time to first find the right people who were trying to do it, to help them, to equip them, to work out how we might get that done safely, how we get the material out, how we verify the material, how we cross-check their claims, their testimony. All these things take time. And it took a lot of time to get the material out of the country. And one of the reasons is because it is so tightly controlled by the government. Everybody knows this, and the government can deny it. But we all know that that is the truth. And that it is, let's say, Eritrea is on the bottom of the world scale of journalistic freedoms. It is beneath North Korea. Eritrea is the most tightly controlled country when it comes to information in the world. These facts mean that when journalists like myself come along, we have to find ways around that system to get what people say is the truth out, to get information out. And so that's why it took so long. Now, the second part of the question was, I think, about the timing. Do you mean in terms of was the documentary issued with a particular timing in mind? The only thing I'd say about that is that of course, when Eritrea and Ethiopia established the peace deal and ending this sort of stalemate that we're all very aware of, we were very keen to find out if that meant that there were any reforms, any changes, any new freedoms inside Eritrea. If there have been, fantastic, great.
So basically, are you saying it was paused in 2018, kind of, to see what is going on or if change is going to take place?
Not so much. It was more that it was taking us so long to get the information out that the peace deal happened before I could get the visual evidence. And then the peace deal occurred. And so then we revisited, we rethought, and we thought, okay, if there are changes then great, we'll represent that. We'll represent the fact that there may be more freedoms and there may be people that are being released from prison or whatever. But it so happened that the people we finally found who were able to do this for us filmed after the peace deal, several months after the peace deal. And that gave it more editorial impact because it showed that after the peace deal, not only did the system of oppression continue, but in the information we've received and cross-checked, it got worse. More people were being detained inside the country than before. And certainly the system did not change or reform in any way. And I think that's been verified by many, many independent reporting as well as ours.
Yeah, and right now the amount of refugees fleeing to Ethiopia in 2020 was 100,000 refugees, and people are still escaping, and the imprisonment is still going on, as you say. But many Eritreans believe they have been betrayed by the international community, even the journalists and every international community in this regard, because there is an ongoing imprisonment and ongoing human rights abuse in Eritrea. And yet in 2016, when the UN recommended or referred the issue of Eritrea to the International Criminal Court, it was seen or perceived by many of Eritreans that this was a very theatrical thing. And the reason being is because ICC doesn't have jurisdictions on Eritrea. And yet, due to this, not action was taken, and nothing has been done by international community for decades. It's been 30 years now. So my question is, how did you see this issue? The issue of human rights abuse, imprisonment, everything that you can think of going on in Eritrea, and yet international community not taking the proper action.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm appalled by the evidence that we obtained. I think the infringements on basic individual human rights is appalling. I don't think it's justified in any way. I know the Eritrean government has a position that they needed to militarize the entire country because of the threat from Ethiopia. But as the independent reporting will indicate, this has now become a system of repression for the entire country by the government to maintain control internally. So this is what's really going on inside the country. Now, in terms of the UN, yes, you're quite right. I mean, we highlighted that in the documentary, and I was in Geneva in 2016 for that UN deliberation. I approached the UN in New York, both the Security Council and the General Assembly and the UNHCR, to try and find out why nothing seemed to have happened. Now, I'm told by those who have been very active in this field, this is still open. It could still be something that's picked up. What it needs is one of the Security Council members to nominate this issue to be put onto the agenda. So it's not dead, but it's just not been picked up. You're quite right. And I did not get an answer from anybody in the UN about why that is. One can only assume that perhaps, the Eritrean government's position, to be fair, is that, the UN didn't prove its position, that didn't have enough evidence. I think that's pushing things too far. I think there's a lot of evidence in that UN report from more than 800 refugees talking about their experiences, and it's very similar to everything else we've obtained as well. So is it politics? Is it the fact that the China and Russia and everybody else we know vetoes any sort of decision against these sort of governments around the world? More than likely, that's more to do with it than anything else. Did it not get picked up by the General Assembly and then recommended to the ICC for another reason? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of politics involved. I don't know the answer to that question. I haven't had a direct information from the UN about that, or from UN member states. But I would say that I don't think it's over necessarily. That report was very damning. Its language was very strong. The process by which countries get recommended to the ICC is complicated, and I just don't know the process that will lead to that. If it may not, and I can totally understand why people then would feel let down by the international community, because where else do you go? What else do you do if you're a people of being so repressed by your own government?
Yeah, and you worked for around 30 years in the area of journalism and the field of journalism, and we have done very unique and distinguished investigative reporting all over the world, Burma and Pakistan and Boko Haram and other topics we can point here. With such unique experience, with such unique overview of around the world that going on human rights, is there any unique character about Eritrea that you find different than you have seen all over the world when it comes to human rights abuses?
You're quite right. I mean, this is what we do. We do a lot of this in many situations. I think I'm mystified by. I mean, I understand the Eritrean government's position in some ways of needing to militarize the country when they perceived a threat from Ethiopia. I mean, it's up to every country. Every country's got the right to defend itself, of course. What I'm mystified by is, one, I think the cruelty of the system, where there's so many accounts that are very consistent about the type of torture and mistreatment, both psychological and physical, of those people that are in detention, that it cannot be made up. It is not made up. Mm-hmm. Which is also independently verified by a lot of other reporting. There's the cruelty aspect, and there's also, this is maybe crossing the line from journalism to a personal view, but you've asked me that question. If the authorities are so concerned about their fellow Eritrean citizens to have sacrificed so much over so many years, then why is it that this system feels the need to have this system in place where so many people feel so horrified by it that they have to leave their country, even at a very young age? So I'm just trying to state the facts. More than 500,000 people have left the country of something like 3.2 million people. That's a huge number per head. I think it's one of the biggest in the world. Why are they leaving? Number one. And number two, I think, why does the system continue when there is no war with Ethiopia anymore? Why do you have to have a system of national service that is unending? And let's be honest, it is. The government will say it's only 18 months. We know that's rubbish. We know it goes on for years. We know it takes everybody's best years of their lives. Why does that continue when there's no war? Is it just a system of repression by a one-party state that is totally unaccountable to its own people?
And in fact, that you have been addressing and you have been asking those questions, and we Eritreans as well ask those questions, but we know we're not going to get answers from the government,
which is interesting in itself, isn't it? I mean,
yes,
so many people have those questions and have legitimate questions, and yet it seems to me that inside Eritrea there is absolutely no vehicle for anybody to criticize the government safely.
Yes, and the witness for that is that the banning of the newspaper or press in 2001 September, and we don't need more witness than that, and it goes on, and nothing has changed since then.
Exactly.
So, my question is the human rights is a universal issue. It's a universal thing that everybody is happy to address, but it's always blurred with some issues and with some factors, and everybody has his own translations and stuff like that, because politics is involved, as you have been saying. So my question here is, when people watch your frontline investigative reporting on Escaping Eritrea, what do you want them to take? Given the factor that your audience are not only just audience, as we have been saying, you have Eritrean audience and you have the rest of the world. And
I think from the Eritreans, I would like personally people to, on both sides of the political spectrum, both supporters of the government, members of the government, and also people who feel that they're being abused by the system. I would like them to realize or to think that the world does care about Eritrea, and that we're interested in Eritrea. We're interested politically because there's so many refugees, but we're interested also because we're just interested on a humanitarian basis. I mean, these are people that feel terribly aggrieved and abused by this system. And there's also a position from the government. I mean, I would have loved the government to have participated in this film, to have talked to us. We tried many times to get their position, to film interviews with their representatives, to show them the information and the videos, and they refused, which is a really important point. If the government has nothing to hide, Why don't they talk to us? And I'd like, from the Eritreans who are feeling abused and aggrieved by the system, I'd like them to know that they're not forgotten, that there is a world and there is journalism and there is a media out there that does care about what people are going through, and that hopefully we can use this platform to inform people around the world, first of all, why refugees are refugees, number one. Mm-hmm. And number two, what's going on inside the country. And number three, maybe at a governmental level, so that when governments are thinking about giving the Eritrean government support for various programs that may or may not actually be doing anything about the refugee program, they know more about what's going on in Eritrea, as well as the UN level. I mean, our job is really just to inform, and that's all we want to really do, is just to try and show the facts.
Yeah, I understand when we do, as a journalist, as an investigative reporter, I understand you have to be on the box of being a journalist, objective and stuff like that. But there are times that these are not easy to do, especially when it comes to human rights. And I am just want to ask you specifically on this one, the Escaping Eritrea production you made. So was there a time that you start feeling more sensitive, trying to stay objective, but you couldn't?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think seeing the people incarcerated in Adabierto in the way that they're being kept in those holding halls, sometimes for years, and certainly without trial or process, is really upsetting to me. I find the injustice and the frustration of it, and the weirdness of it. I just find it very. I can't quite work out of my head any justification for that sort of system. When I hear accounts of torture, where the people are being tortured to give over information about who helped them leave the country and what that was all about, that's upsetting. I was upset by Hannah Petros Solomon's story about her parents being the way that they were detained 20 years ago. I mean, having your parent snatched and you have not having the ability from that moment on to even communicate with them is a horrible cruelty that I don't think any system can justify. And they've done that to both her parents. And that's just one story. We know many, many stories that are very similar. So I find that cruelty disturbing. But I would also like to say that I found within the project Eritreans very resilient, and I also found that there's a real register of hope in all Eritreans I speak to, that they believe one day that from their point of view things will change.
Sometimes Eritrea is designed, or the system has designed the situation in Eritrea as no way out or no way in, kind of. So that's the predicament we are in as Eritreans all over the world and inside. So is there any follow-up or similar production on Eritrea that we can expect from you?
Yeah, I've been asked about that a lot, actually, by Eritreans. Maybe. I don't know at this point. I think if we found something new to say, then yes. And certainly we've got a lot of contacts with people now, and we would be open to ideas, definitely.
So those are the questions I have for you today. Is there anything you would like to add or say something, last comment for you?
No, I'm very happy with your interest. Thank you so much. I mean, look, I know it's very divided, but I would urge those on the government side to remember that we gave them the opportunity to participate in this film. And to us as journalists, it's very important that we get that fairness and accuracy. I'm disappointed that they didn't take up that opportunity, and I want people who are putting out all the social media against the film and against me to realise that the government was given the opportunity to talk to us, and they did not. Why not? Ask yourselves that question. If they've got nothing to hide, why don't they talk to us? And instead, there's a social media campaign which I'm meant to be apparently worried about. It doesn't work that way. You know, we present the evidence we find, and I do that for the people that feel that they don't have a voice, and that's very much the situation in Eritrea today.
Thank you, Ivan Williams, producer and director of the Escaping Eritrea production, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much. Really like talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.